2, 1.
Anyway, hate to be a little drum, but I just, I've been watching a couple of news articles this weekend and last night, and the country's really getting crazier and crazier. So, and I'm saying the same thing in hopes to get people's attention, because we need to have a united middle class. A united and healthy middle class creates a strong America. And you have to listen to who wants that to happen and has ways of making it happen. And then we need to vote people in and vote people out according to their strengths or weaknesses. And it's going to take some time to get finally a handle over our political system, because we have no handle over this. And the founding fathers gave us this. We owe it to them. They weren't perfect people, and they were elites, but they at least saw that this country, the middle class of this country, needs to run the important issues directed by our politicians. And just like you have a head of a company and you have the crew of a company, if that's not going right in a company, one or the other, that company goes out, right? Well, this country is much, obviously a whole different scenario, but it matches a bit, because we're on the way to communism right now, or socialism, and there's just no getting around that fact that either we come together and we pull together and we look out for our neighbors and we talk to each other and we do those things that our founding fathers gave us the freedom to do, or we don't have a society anymore. Anyway, we're going to start getting this down. I'm still working on some lighting. Barbie's moving to California, so she's going to be producer Barbie remote. But I think we might be able to get her on camera this way. So with all of that said, you guys have a great weekend. Say hi to each other. Go out and say hi to somebody. Just wave at them, man. Start that way. Just wave at them. Every time you see them, wave at them if you don't know them. And then you'll see the reaction change, evolve. You'll see the body language evolve. Go out and say hi to a couple people today. Anyway, love you guys. Thanks for being here. Most people don't wake up saying, I think I'll ignore my mental health, right? They wake up saying, I don't have time to fall apart. They've got kids to get to school, bills to pay, right? Jobs that don't ever slow down, a marriage they're just trying to hold together. And in a world that feels louder, heavier, and more demanding every single year. And somewhere in the middle of all that, we keep telling them, go get some help. As if help is simple, right? As if it's affordable. As if help fits neatly into a calendar that's already overflowing. Today's conversation is for the great American middle class. The people who carry everything, fix everything, and quietly tell themselves they'll deal with it later. But you know what? Later just keeps getting pushed further and further away. Welcome to Insights. I'm your host, Rod Duff, and with the ever-present producer, Barbie. Here's the hard truth most people won't say out loud. Mental health is often built for people with time, money, and margin. Most working families don't have any of those three things. They have stress that never shuts off. They have a nervous system stuck in survival mode. They have trauma that doesn't look dramatic. It looks like irritability. It looks like exhaustion. It looks like emotional shutdown and short fuses with the people they love the most. And when we don't talk about that honestly, people don't heal. They just cope. They go numb, right? They grind. Sadly, they break silent. That's why today's guest matters. Carter Doyle doesn't talk about mental health from a pedestal. He talks about it from the trenches, right? Carter Doyle is a board certified psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, and he can talk better than I can. He's a trauma informed clinician trained in IFS and EMDR. He's a PhD researcher and the founder of Leaf Psychiatry in Michigan. But more importantly, he works every single day with the working class and middle class Americans who are trying to hold their lives together while pressure keeps rising. First responders, military families, working parents, men and women who don't have the luxury of falling apart, but are paying the price for holding it all in. Today, we're not doing mental health buzzwords. No, we're not doing Instagram therapy. We're not pretending that everyone can take the year off to go find themselves. We're talking about real mental health for real people. What does it actually mean to regulate your nervous system without a textbook or a retreat center? Why does trauma show up as anger, withdrawal, or burnout instead of sadness? What happens inside of a marriage when both partners are exhausted and neither feels safe enough to say that out loud? How do you protect your kids emotionally when you're running on fumes yourself? And why faith and community, when handled correctly, can be sources of healing, not shame. One of the most important things Carter brings to this conversation is translation. He takes complex science, IFS, EMDR, trauma research, identity based stress, and puts it into a language that makes sense to people who are just trying to survive a Wednesday. He understands that for many families, mental health care doesn't start with a diagnosis. It starts with one honest moment, just one conversation, one realization that what you're feeling isn't weakness. It's your body doing exactly what it learned to do. And survival mode was never meant to be permanent. We have over 70% of Americans, adults and children alike, are dealing with some sort of mental health. We talk about that a lot on this show. And this conversation matters right now because the middle class is carrying invisible weight. We talk about inflation. We all talk about jobs. We talk about politics. We don't talk enough about what all of that does to the human nervous system, to marriages, to parenting, to faith, and to identity. And when people don't understand what's happening inside of them, they blame themselves. Carter helps people stop doing that. So today, whether you're a working parent, a first responder, a veteran, a clinician, or somebody who feels like life has been on high alert for far too long, this conversation is for you. No hype, no judgment, no shame, just practical, guided, straight talk about healing. How healing actually begins when life is busy and messy. Stick with us. Bring your questions into the live chat. And if this conversation helps you breathe a little easier, share it with somebody who needs to hear they're not broken, they're human. This is Insights and Straight Talk with Rod Duff, producer Barbie, and as I clicked a little too early, joining us now is Carter Doyle. How are you, brother from another mother? How you doing,
man? Good. How are you? Thanks so much for having me, Rod.
It's a pleasure to have you here. And you have 135 people that have already joined in, which
Awesome.
I like because they're that little monologue. Hopefully, they're listening to the setup and going straight. One thing I didn't ask you to do I think I
Yeah.
started, but I got sidetracked. Sorry about that. But when we open the show, we typically like to kind of get on the journey, 5 minutes or so while people are warming up their tea or they're, grabbing some sambuca or something, some coffee.
Sure.
Why don't you tell the journey that you were on that led you to the journey that brought you here to us today?
Yeah, I'd love to. I started off my career in emergency medical services as a paramedic, working. I actually served in a rural community for several years where hospitals were more than 45 minutes away. But just
What area? You're in Detroit
Central
now.
Michigan. Yep, I'm in
Central
Detroit
Michigan.
now.
Okay.
Yep,
Okay.
so Central
Um,
Michigan.
which is a lot like Mangum, Oklahoma. I'm from Chicago, moved to here. So I feel you,
Okay.
brother. Okay, go ahead. So you started off in a rural area as a technician.
Yeah, started off was a paramedic. I worked
I
both
mean,
in
a
kind of
paramedic. Sorry.
yeah, no, that's okay. Worked in Metro Detroit for a while, so ran urban emergency medical services, and then also worked in rural community, seeing the crises that were happening. Because when 911 gets dialed, it's usually not a preventative measure; it's an emergency response, right? We're
Right.
dealing with some sort of crisis or emergency that's already happened, and from there I went to nursing school, worked in the emergency department for a long time, but
Wow. A lot of pressure.
I yeah, tons of pressure. It is kind of our country's catch-all health system. When folks have nowhere else to go or they don't have access to care, that's where they're ending up, whether it's good or not. That's where they're coming to receive care. And I really got tired of seeing people not get better. That really wears on someone who, and I think there's so many other healthcare providers who would identify with this, that like it, everybody gets into healthcare to see people get better and to heal and to do well. And you don't get to see that in emergency medicine. Oftentimes, what you see are folks coming back and getting sicker and sicker and sicker until they die. And so I realized that for just my own sanity and for my own health, like I needed to get on the other end of this. And I needed to put myself in a position where I could help people and walk with folks to help them get better, to help them live the lives that they wanted to live, that they wanted to have access to, but were getting stuck. And so that led me into psychiatry and mental health. It started off with just helping our first responders and our ER staff cope with the stresses and the awful things that they were seeing, and be able to go home and kind of leave work at work. Um,
Wait. Hold there for a second. So when you first started off, now is this in your practice or were you working with people that were your teammates, your first responders, your other
I
EMTs?
started off just working with other peers as a registered nurse and as a paramedic. I got some additional training and crisis counseling and care, and
Wow.
began just to help my peers and do what I could. And even it was my own personal journey of making sense of some of the experiences I was having. Um, there's a
For
several
instance,
ins
for instance, for instance.
yeah, I mean, for instance, there's several events that stick with me. One, was a young child who was the victim of a gunshot wound to the head, suffered by someone who was severely mentally ill, and her mother had been shot as well. And that's the the cries of a mother who's watching her child die are something you can't really get out of your head easily, and
No.
rightly so. Like, I think there'd probably be something wrong if I could shake that off easily. But, it's moments like that, or, responding to a house where, you walk in the door and mom thrusts her limp, lifeless baby into your arms. And, and you just got to turn it off and go to work. Um, but I'm also human, and we're all human. Like, at the end of the day, the problem with our health system is that healthcare is provided by human beings who have human needs, right? And these things sit with us and they leave impacts. And at the end of the day, if I'm going to come back to work, if my coworkers and peers are going to come back to work, we got to figure out what we do with that. So that really led me into mental health, and ended up going back to school, earning a master's degree.
I
Um,
saw that. That's impressive.
yeah, becoming a psychiatric nurse practitioner, where now I primarily work with folks, on the spectrum of mental illness, from severe psychotic illnesses to anxiety and depression, and kind of everybody in between: police officers, firefighters, paramedics who are just trying to cope with things that they've seen on the job, to folks who are severely mentally ill with things like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder, and who need a lot of additional support. Um, and I found it to be super, super rewarding, because I get to see folks get better, get to see folks thrive and get their lives back.
Yeah, no, 100%. And that's obviously, well, probably the mental health as well as physical health. But I think mental health, I mean, you look at a couple of things when you talk about life, the human experience. There's longevity and then there's quality, right?
Yep,
You want a mixture of both, right? And so the
absolutely.
physical help is both ways, but you can be living a long ways and be dealing with mental health, and that's not a quality of life. It's not as much of a quality as if you're taking care of something. I want to sidetrack just to pivot, and we
Sure.
talked about this earlier in the green room, but you went through a couple of different people or areas of people that you work with. You mentioned
Yeah.
first responders and so forth. But I want to just, and we talked about this early on, as far as
Mhm.
trans people, I just want to poke at it and see if anybody brings anything up in the questions. There's a lot of questions already. But
Yeah.
what is your, what, so the trans community is about 1% ish, something like that, of the
Mhm.
population. I know in certain countries in Southeast Asia, it's very, I think, a larger percentage of the population in certain small areas, maybe not, or just maybe more noticeable. But let me ask you, what, in your opinion, there's a lot of this in the politics and political world today, and there's a lot of discussion
Yep.
back and forth. And honestly, I think the trans community is somewhere around the area of where the gay community was. Okay,
Yep.
about in the 80s ish. Like
I
today,
agree.
a man and a man, a woman and a woman is just another partnership. And
Mhm.
and it went through some. AIDS came out, and there was a lot of stuff
Yeah.
that really added to the furor of
Mhm.
society in that engagement back then. Is that the same situation today? And why is there such a protection on people younger than legal age to get a tattoo? Here, for instance, that's a complex question. We have over 300 people on right now.
Awesome.
So is that a fair question to put in your lap as I just packaged it?
Sure. I mean, I think what you're asking, Rod, is like, well, what do we do with this, right? Because
Yes.
I'm
Yeah. Yeah.
this is hard. And I know that I think that there's relatively few folks out there that aren't touched by this to some extent, right? Whether it's your kids are going to school with somebody who's trying to figure out their own gender identity, or maybe it's somebody in your family or community. I think you're certainly right. In 1973, the American Psychiatric Association officially removed homosexuality as a psychiatric diagnosis. Um,
I did not
it
know that.
Yeah, in 1973, it officially came out, but it was actually kind of rebranded as what was called ego dystonic homosexuality. So they really kind of it's complex, and the history behind all this stuff is also kind of bundled into just politics and the social structures.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, and the fabric of our society, because many of the ways we conceptualize sexual orientation are also tied to gender identity. Um, I bring up the history there simply to say that I think as a Western culture and society, we're on a journey. we're just like any other individual is. We're all trying to figure out how we do this thing called life, that can be super hard. And
Yes.
there's folks who have a variety of experiences there. And my hope would be like, before I even say anything in particular, like, I think the one thing that I would hope we would just be able to do for our neighbors and for each other is just give some space to say, hey, folks are trying to figure this thing out, and it's not always easy or clean cut. And if we can give folks some space to not have it all figured out yet, like, I think that's super helpful.
Oh,
I
I
mean,
agree. Totally agree with that.
I agree with you, Rod. I think that in many ways, the gender diverse community and folks who are gender nonconforming and don't really fall into a simple male female gender category, that community is a little bit behind, where kind of the lesbian and gay community has been. I think there is probably a little bit of a gap there, and I think as a culture, as we've become more tolerant and more accepting and just more willing to honor and acknowledge the diversity of experience that happens within humanity, I think we've slowly become more open to other people's experiences. But I guess if I could just say one thing, it would just be, it kind of like Ted Lasso. If you watch the TV
I
show Ted
love that
Lasso,
show. Oh God,
yep.
I love that show.
My favorite quote from him is "Be curious, not judgmental." Um,
My favorite line of all time, the poet Walt Whitman. The dart. You're talking about the dart scene right now, aren't you?
yep, I am.
I
Yeah,
love that. I put it on here a couple of times. I love that. Be
awesome.
curious,
Yeah,
not judgmental. Now, I just want to poke the bear a little bit here.
yeah, yeah. Let's do it.
Um, I think we'd be a lot further along with that if we didn't have to. Okay, let me rephrase this.
Hmm.
If and I'm not dancing around. I'm just trying to make the right question put the right way.
Sure.
And it is a subject that needs to be danced around still a little bit because it's so volatile. What is
Hmm.
what is your opinion of this? Is it political? Why there's such a push in schools for the whole child transitioning, like 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old kind of thing, without telling the parents? There's that. That's a very big deal. And equally as has become as big of a deal is men, biological men, what would it be considered? Trans woman?
Yeah, yeah.
Anyway, going into locker rooms and going into sports. Why is that such a big hold on for? It seems like it's a political thing to just divide the nation, keep us
Hmm.
divided. I mean, if that wasn't there, I don't think the trans thing would be. I don't think it'd be an issue if those two things would. I don't think anybody would ever talk about it. Why do you think all that's happening? And then we'll go back to the other stuff. But I do want to
Sure.
unfold this a little bit in case anybody wants to jump into that subject.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one thing that I'm keenly aware of, as human beings, is that we tend to externalize, or we tend to like put into our external worlds what's happening inside of us, right? What's happening internally.
Okay.
And so I think first, maybe we need to slow down and ask, like, well, what's happening inside of most people as they approach these things and as they approach these ideas? And I think what we're probably finding is that there's a lot of America that's not entirely sure about this conceptualization or this construct that we call gender, right? Like, what even is that? Um,
Now, let me just stop you there because I
yeah.
think most people in America and other parts of the world, I think most people are aware of what they
Mhm.
believe is what gender is. So that it's that I think what you're saying there is most people of the 1% who are going through that is what you mean, or are you saying that people are seeing from the outside and there's people that have and I think there's definite medical statistics out there that say there
Mhm.
are certain situations where people do find themselves in the wrong body. But I think
Mhm.
370 million Americans, I think most people are kind of don't deal with that. That's
Yeah.
not their life. But there
So
are, I don't know what would that leave? So if it's 1%, 300 million, that'd be like 3 million people, three, four,
yeah.
5 million people, something like that, right?
Yeah. So Rod, maybe I'll rephrase it there and kind of frame it a
Please,
little
because
bit
I didn't quite
differently.
get that.
Yeah, yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think a better way to say it is that for folks who have never felt that discordance between their gender and what they like feel themselves to be or how they feel like they're navigating the world, like many folks haven't really been forced to think about it on a personal level because it's not something they've experienced. you know in the same way, like many folks have never had to think about what it's like to struggle with alcoholism. It's a very unique struggle for somebody who has, right? And it's hard for folks from
Okay,
the
that's a good.
outside.
Stay with that. That's a real good because I dealt with that. I
Mhm.
mean, deal with it, right? Still do.
Yeah.
Um, but stay with that because I think there's a lot more people that know what the issues of AA
Hmm.
is. Right? Let's
Yeah.
keep that as a group. They know what that issue is, whether they deal with it or not. And most people don't have any clue. I think growing up, I think everybody males have like cross dressed at some point or done something,
Sure.
put on saw their sister do something and put on something, and it was a thing, a moment, and whatever. And I
Hmm.
think a lot of people have gone through that. But what you're talking about is that next level where somebody's, let's say 8 years. Well, that's still a little young, but a child is going. I
Hmm.
don't. I feel more. The tomboy.
Yeah.
Kind of
Sure.
episode. So there's some of that is, and some of that isn't. So we're talking about a very small amount, but
Hmm.
if you use alcoholism, I think everybody gets that. There's a small amount of alcoholics or drug abusers in the world, but they exist, and there's a thing, there's a reason for all of that. So
Yeah.
compare that. Yeah, that's
And,
a good path to go down.
and, and yeah, and I want to make it clear that I'm not saying that folks who are, struggling with their gender identity or gender diversity, right? Like I think the analogy that I'm drawing is this is about internal experiences people are having. And there's going to be a disconnect if you haven't had that same internal experience, right?
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Like Rod, as somebody who hasn't personally struggled with alcoholism, Rod, I can listen to your story, I can hear you, and I can try my best to understand, but there's still going to be a level that I haven't experienced that like you have. And so there's going to be a way in which I don't fully get it, but I can certainly try. And I think in the same way, right, we're talking about internal experiences for folks who have different experiences of gender. And that's really hard because most of us don't have that experience to identify with. And it
Of
feels
course.
very scary and foreign. And the idea of like, what do you
To
mean
who? To
somebody?
to me not knowing it, or to you knowing it?
I think
What's
both.
scary? Both
I,
sides. Okay, go
I
on. Go
think
on.
both sides. I think both sides. It can be really hard, right? Because as somebody from the outside and the population at large, right, in these political issues, like, what do you mean somebody needs to share locker rooms like with somebody who has different organs than me? Like that feels strange. Or having someone of the opposite gender participate in my child's youth sports. Like, what do you mean by that, right? And that
So
feels.
stay there. Stay there. Do you think that's fair? I mean, how do we manage through that? Because there's no way, in
Yeah.
my opinion, the gay and lesbian community was dealing with just being accepted. The trans
Hmm.
community, the T, uh, I'm sorry, I'm not, I don't know all the letters.
Yeah.
But that community is going another level. Do you think that's political, or do you think the community actually wants this,
Well,
or
so
is that an unknown? Is that an unfair question?
maybe I would just walk it back a step, Rod, and I would just say, like, I mean, the hard thing is, and this is what we do it in, kind of like tribalistic Western society, right, is we kind of create a
Okay.
caricature of the other person, right, or the other group of people,
The enemy, so to
the
speak.
enemy, the them, right, the
Them.
problem.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's easy to get very frustrated and angry and say, this is what they want, right? Or this is what they believe, or this is what they're about. But I think so often what we find is if you get to know people individually and you realize that they're your neighbors and your coworkers, and the things that are happening politically don't always align with the individuals that we can see as fellow human beings.
Yeah.
So I think that there are a lot of these questions and they're tough and it's complicated because I think what we're trying to balance are the experiences, the internal experiences of a variety of people. So, like, imagine, Rod, for a second, right? And this is very hard. And I'm doing this as someone who identifies as a male. I was born into a, genetically or biologically male body, right? So, the best I can
Are you talking
do.
about yourself right now?
Yes,
Or you're
myself.
working with somebody? Okay, so you're
Well,
you're born into a male body, but a
and I
female.
identify as male, right?
Oh, you
I
identify
identify
as
as male.
male.
Yep.
Okay.
So I'm just saying that, like, this is the perspective that I have, but I can listen to, right, the
Oh, I got.
experience of
I'm
someone
sorry.
else.
I'm sorry. I'm
Yep.
sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Um, I listen to the experiences of others who are having a very different experience of their body, right, than me.
Sure.
Um,
So
and
you're talking about from. I'm looking from the outside in, sort of, but you're talking about somebody who's feeling that from the inside out.
yes, yeah, you know, I can see how there would be a sense of like wanting to be accepted and wanting to be able to fit um, in a way that feels concordant or aligned with, right, your internal experience, even though how somebody might see you externally isn't fully aligned with that. Um,
Yeah, but that's not that, Carter. If we could just, um, so I totally get exactly what you're saying. There's people on Nick here, for instance. This is helping me rethink self care realistically. So we'll
mhm.
get to the question. There's a freaking dozen questions, but they're about different
Yeah,
systems, nervous system, and
sure,
all that.
sure.
So I don't want to drive it too deep, but I do want to get to this
Yeah.
one aspect. Is is the trans community in your, say a bold statement if I'm right, is the trans
Okay.
community a political pawn in some of this that's going on right now, or are they wanting the political help to get some of these two specific things um, out into the world and eventually accepted by societies? What do you think is going on there, or is there anything going on? It's just a wild world we're living in. Not the trans world, but just in general,
Yeah.
media is screwed up. You don't know what to believe anybody says anymore. Now with AI, it's even worse. But go ahead. What do you think? I
Hmm.
just want to get to that point. I really want to know that because I think a lot of people, there's a couple conversations we need to have. We need to bring the middle class together. All right.
Yep.
That's for our own use. There's a utopia coming. We need to have our government under control, meaning them doing for us what they should be doing. And so hiring, or I should, bringing in the right politicians for the right jobs. Both
Hmm.
sides. This isn't, Republicans and Democrats
Absolutely
are both
agree.
idiots. So what do you think? I really want to know. There's a couple. There's like there's some really big ones, but there's like global warming, which has been global
Mm.
cooling, has been this, has been that, has been this, has been that. While people are flying in their private jets to conferences over in Europe about global warming and the carbon footprint and all that. So there's all this
Mhm.
weird information back and forth. I think the trans discussion is maybe not equally as
Yeah.
volatile because it's a smaller community, but
Mhm.
I think there's a couple conversations we need to really flush out because what's happening is we keep getting divided. We're divided over a trans issue now. which really
Yep.
shouldn't be an issue, but it's being made one because of these parental infringements and these locker room infringements in the
Yeah.
sports. And girls are getting hurt because men are slamming 90-mile-an-hour volleyballs at their faces, versus a girl can hit, I don't know, 40. I don't know. I'm making stuff up. What do you
Hmm.
think? What I'm trying to dig into that, just to
Yeah.
not shake it like a bone, but what do you think? Is this
Hmm.
and is this a wise move for the trans community?
Yeah. So I certainly don't want to speak on behalf of an entire community of which I'm not
Sure.
directly a part. So I want to name that.
Yeah,
I think the other
you
thing,
work with a lot of you
yeah,
work with trans people though,
yeah.
right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh,
you
yeah.
have
All
these
the time.
conversations. Okay.
So here's, you know, a lot of times in politics and in sound bites, we like to take the fringe, right, and an extreme, and then
Yes.
project that onto, right, the median and the mean.
Okay. 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 I'm getting you.
And so, Rod, what I would just ask, okay, as somebody who is a friend to and who cares for a lot of folks in the trans community, what I would just ask is that, hey, can we turn off the TV for a second and let's just go have coffee with each other? Like,
Yes.
find out what that person in your community who maybe you don't agree with, maybe you don't think that the way that they're expressing their gender is quote unquote right? Could we just have coffee with that person, go to lunch, and just have a conversation? You don't have to walk away agreeing. But why don't we just be curious and ask them, hey, what do you think about this? Like, what is it that you would want in our child's school? Right? What is it that you think, right, you need, or what would be the middle ground? Because my sense would be, Rod, is that the stuff that we hear on the news is one end of a spectrum of a variety of opinions. And certainly, I mean, we can all look at stuff in the news media and be like, okay, this extreme that someone is taking this to is bananas. And that's wrong and that's nuts. And like, I'm not gonna sign off on that, right? But I think that's a smaller minority of a minority. I think the vast, majority of folks exist on this spectrum. And I think when we can sit down and say, hey, these are the concerns that I have. What are the concerns that you have? How can we meet each other here and see each other as human beings? Because when we just get stuck in a media narrative or we get stuck in a caricature, we lose the humanity that otherwise we would be sharing if we just sat down and had a cup of coffee.
Not agree more. 100% could not agree more. As a matter of fact, we should have some people, maybe some people that would want to talk uh, from your client base, come on
Yeah.
and have this kind of conversation, not a crazy, wild.
Hmm.
When I say crazy, I shouldn't be using words like that on this show.
Yeah.
But a wild emotional,
Yeah.
it's all or nothing. I go into conversation saying, please teach me. I said in the
Hmm.
beginning, I consider myself a safety net. If I understand it, everybody else
Yeah.
will. Last question on this, unless there's some that pop in. And
Sure.
thank you, Nick, for the comment here. But in your opinion, and I don't know if this is a good question or not. So it's coming out more and more, and it did during the gay and lesbian. You said in the '70s. I was only 70. See, I was born in '62, so I would have been like in my teenage years. So yeah, I guess it was earlier than the '80s where I was thinking. But
Hmm.
do you believe in the people coming into you that are trans or cis or the different variations, the
Hmm.
spectrum? Are a lot of those people having issues mentally, or are they coming to you because they're having this issue and it's affecting their self-confidence, their own mentality about life, about suicide, probably a very
Hmm.
high. I mean, it's high for everybody. I am a victim of that myself.
Mhm.
Well, I didn't say that right, but I dealt with that myself. I wasn't
Mhm.
successful, obviously, but what do you
Yeah.
think? There's this storyline that's really starting to come out that I remember back from the gay and lesbian communities, where there
Mhm.
was mental illness that was involved in that, and that's where it's coming from. do, why are people coming to you who are trans? Obviously, different people have different issues. Why are they coming to you? Because society is making it harder for them. Let's take out the school argument and the athletic argument.
Mhm.
That to me is an extreme. Let's keep it in the middle class. To have these
Yeah.
conversations, why are people coming to you?
I think a lot of times, Rod, it's people just need somebody to talk to about this and
Let it go.
that can help them figure this out and aren't going to be pushing them in one way or the other, who are
There
able to
you go.
hold some non-judgmental space and say, "Hey, yeah, I get this is hard, and this is a safe place to talk about things that are hard, and we can
Yeah.
do that together. And I'm trying to figure out life just as much as you are, and you don't have to be alone in this." Of course, when folks come to clinical attention in psychiatry and they're coming to see me, oftentimes it's because there's something else that's going on, that's really troublesome, like they're beginning to have trouble functioning in life or coping with things. Um, but it's really a variety, and sometimes it's incidental to something else that's going on. I think what the American Psychiatric Association found, and what oftentimes, there can be a selection bias, or a bias that occurs when if you work in mental health
What do
care.
you mean selection bias?
So what I
What's that?
mean is, yeah, like what I mean is, I work in mental health care, right? So all the people that
Right.
come to see me are going to be struggling with some sort of mental illness, you
Right.
know? So if the only time I interact with people who are from Oklahoma is because I'm meeting them in clinical practice and I'm not meeting them outside in the community, it would be easy for me to draw the conclusion that all people from Oklahoma are mentally ill. But
I think
if I
I think
go,
I think we are. I think a lot of us are. Yeah.
yeah, and but if I of course were to go to Oklahoma, which is actually where my mom's from, I think I would find
Oh well.
something very different. Yeah. Um, I'd find a very different probably truth in there.
Yeah.
And so I think that there is sometimes a bit of a bias. And I think that's actually what happened in 1973 when the APA decided that, hey, we got to take homosexuality out, right? It's because the only time psychiatrists were meeting gay people is when they came to their office because they were struggling with a mental illness. And they realized, like, well, wait a minute, we didn't go meet the rest of the community, the rest of these people that are actually by and large functioning okay.
Yeah. Actually, a lot of them doing very well. I was checking out the divorce rate the other day, a couple of months ago, and
Hmm.
it's going up. It's constantly going up. It's like
Yeah.
70% now couples get a divorce. But then they broke it down and they said, out of that number, all 70%, uh, gay men have the lowest divorce rate by far, like down in the 30s or lower, like two
Yeah.
guys together, way down there. The heterosexual men and women are at about still that 50%.
Hmm.
Lesbian women are like 90%, or not, maybe not 90, but a higher number, 70
Hmm.
something. So it's interesting that 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 breakup. You would think by the old standard it would be gay and lesbian have the highest divorce rate, and straight, so to speak, couples don't. Well, it's not. They're in the middle. They're in the middle there. They're and it's now more of a sexual discussion, a gender discussion, as far as, wait, who's causing the
Hmm.
issues in the marriages. But let's I'm glad you took some time with me on that, because I would like to set up some, because I really like to
Sure.
get into some of these discussions, because I'm tired of how the media and the government
Yes.
uh, kind of work together on everything. I mean, Fox is this left or right, whatever, and CNN is right, and they're just
Yep.
sounding boards for their own political party, whatever that is, which
Hmm.
has to do with money and corruption and everything else, I'm sure. So it's frustrating. But I
Yeah.
appreciate that because we need to have these conversations and kind of and hopefully that leads to this discussion going away. Because I mean, at the end of the day, let's say there's 10 million people who are trans or in the process or whatever. There's a number, whatever that is.
Yep.
Right now, I think it sounds like um, 10 million people are being represented by 100,000 very loud voices, the extremes in our worlds that we live in, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And we can't have that. We can't have that. Let's broaden the topic a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's go to Randall here. What is this? What is one simple nervous system reset we can do at work? Which is a
Love
big
that
deal.
question.
I
Yep.
do
Oh
too.
yeah. Yeah.
Thanks,
Um,
Randall.
yeah. And I think there's, it's kind of like family and managers, I feel like are kind of the two categories of people that can usually get us ramped up and going. Um, and,
That's
and
true.
we spend a lot of time at work. For most folks, we're spending more than 40 hours a week there. And this is so relevant. So I think the first thing that I would say is, and this is, I don't want to be too goofy and too simplistic, but honestly, take a deep breath. Like just
When
breathe.
you're there at your desk and just, it's amazing how good that does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's
And
amazing.
there are good scientific rationales behind that. We're stimulating our vagus nerve, our parasympathetic or our relaxation nervous system when we do
What's the
that.
nerve? What's the vagus nerve? I'm not familiar with that term.
Yeah. So the vagus nerve is the nerve that's primarily involved in our parasympathetic or our relaxation, feed and breed type responses. That nerve, when it is stimulated, stimulates that relaxation, that type of response, as opposed to a sympathetic response, which is like fight or flight.
Okay. So
Yeah.
vagus or sympathetic are those two
Yep.
different? Interesting. I did not know. Wow. I'm old too, and I never heard that. Or maybe I just
Yeah.
don't remember it.
Well, yeah, and they kind of go by a variety of names. We sometimes we call it the parasympathetic nervous system versus the sympathetic nervous system. Um,
Okay,
you know,
gotcha. Yep.
fight or flight, feed and breed. All sorts of names. But by taking that big deep breath and really just focusing on our breathing, helping to slow ourselves down a little bit. Just noticing like, what am I feeling inside of my body right now?
Hey, hang
And
on a second, Carter. Hey, everybody in the audience right now, you all almost not hitting 400 yet, but everybody right now, just take a second because this is, you've heard it before, but everybody right now, taking a deep breath, hold it, just let it out. It's amazing the difference that you feel. I mean, look at I've slowed down. I'm not purposely doing that. It's just, you're right. That
Mhm.
take a deep breath. So first part of your advice, if you're at work and you need a reset, take that deep breath sitting in your chair at the office or in the boardroom. You can do it anywhere. Nobody's gonna, if you're not too wild
Yeah.
about it, you could do it right in front of a meeting you're having.
Absolutely. Take a deep breath. I mean, sometimes if you're in a meeting that's getting contentious, encourage everybody else to do it with you.
Oh, good
Um,
idea.
just, hey guys, can we just slow down here, take a pause, and let's all just like take a deep breath here for a second. You know, the second thing I would say is if you're by yourself or you're in a space where you can do this, is just take a second to be observant about yourself. Um, I kind of use the analogy of like you're sitting on a train and you're just watching the scenery go by.
Mm.
You're not making any judgments about it. You're just observing, you're seeing things, you're not interacting with it. Do that same thing for yourself. Like, oh yeah, I feel that tension in my back that's always there. And I feel myself sitting on this chair, and this chair feels kind of comfortable and good because it's kind of where I sit every day. And I'm sitting around here, and up there's Jill, and she drives me up a wall every time she calls my phone. But there she is over there in her cubicle and her space. And up over there's Rob, and I'm good friends with him. And hey, we I gotta go reach out to him and get a beer someday, or get some coffee, and just observing for a second. It's okay to notice our feelings. We don't have to follow them when we notice them.
Mm.
So just being an active observer.
You mean actually participate in your life then?
Yeah. Yeah. Just notice.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So thank you, Ronald. I appreciate that. That was perfect because we all deal with that day. I'm doing the thing I love most in the world for work, and which is
Mhm.
this. Now I do this full time. By the way, quick plug out. One of our sponsors, the Mangum City Library, they sponsor us. We for the Regeneration School Project. They have us in one of their studios, and they take care of everything here, treat us really well. So big shout out to
Hey.
them. I appreciate it, guys. Um, Jennifer here. How can busy parents regulate stress under 5 minutes a day? Because the first two out of the gate, you said it. Managers or families, first two out of the gate is family and parents here and
Yep.
at the office. So we're hitting on all points here, Carter. What do you say to
Yes.
Jennifer here? What do you say to her?
Yep. So, Jennifer, I might say a couple things. And one, I think it depends on the amount of stress you're facing. Um,
Right.
I mean, maybe the best use of that 5 minutes is just to be honest with yourself about the amount of stress that you're under, and
What does that look like?
consider.
What does that look like? If I'm being honest with
Yep.
myself I'm taking this 5 minutes. I'm going to be honest with. What does that look like to me?
Yep. I think we got to check in with ourselves, Rod, and just say, hey, how am I feeling? Is this what I'm feeling in my body? Is this over the top, or is this abnormal, or is this even how I want to be living? You know, am I on edge all the time? Am I constantly worried like something bad is going to happen? Do I feel like I'm constantly teetering on the edge? Am I noticing it in my kids? Like, are my family on edge? Like, am I noticing this start to transfer onto them?
Okay.
Like, I think that's where we got to start, because in under 5 minutes a day, right, might not be feasible for what's going on. And I think we just got to honor that. And so maybe the best thing you can do in that 5 minutes is strategize and game plan how you can get some additional support and help. Um, it's okay to admit and to acknowledge, like, hey, I'm not okay right now. I need some additional support. Life is particularly tough. Um, if you're gonna take that 5 minutes, I would encourage kind of like something along the lines of what I was just saying is, take a deep breath, notice what's going on inside of you, be observant, and also you're allowed to do things that feel good. You know, of course, feel good and aren't going to be harmful. You know,
Right.
there's all sorts of things that feel good that can be very bad. Um, but
You don't want
you're
to do
also
those.
Yeah, we don't want to do those, but there are all sorts of things that we can all do that feel good. Um, Maybe it's enjoying a piece of chocolate. You know, maybe it's, hey, I'm gonna just take this 5 minutes and I'm just gonna sit here on my couch and I'm gonna watch 5 minutes of this TV show that I've wanted, or I'm gonna listen to a song that I know makes me feel good, or I'm just gonna sit here and enjoy some silence and peace without somebody interrupting me. Um, that's going to be different, I think, for every person, for every parent, for every family. Um, but just be observant. And I think you got to be honest with yourself about what you really need. And I don't think we need to make value judgments or feasibility assessments of what it is we feel like we need. I think we just got to start with being honest about what we actually need right now. Um, you know,
What we need right now because of what we are going through right now.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Very interesting stuff, brother. Um, John Morris here. First of all, talk about IFS before we answer the question, and then roll into
Hmm.
it. He's asking, is IFS, is that
Yeah.
really reasonable if you don't have continuing therapy, formal therapy?
Hmm.
First, go into IFS, and then
Yeah.
uh, is it is it a sit-alone ability, or does it
Hmm.
need to have formal therapy as a follow-up, or as a
So the
follow-up?
short, yeah, short answer to John's question is yes. Um, what is IFS? I know it's a paradigm that a lot of folks haven't had an introduction to, or is maybe a little bit new or novel. IFS is internal family systems therapy. It was developed by Richard Schwartz, or as he goes by Dick Schwartz. He has a couple wonderful books published. One is No Bad Parts. It's very accessible. I would honestly encourage most folks not to read it, but listen to it as an audiobook. I think it's a little bit easier, actually. Um,
If you listen to it versus actually read it?
yeah, if you listen to it instead of read it. I've just found that listening to it allows you to kind of sit with the material and hit the pause button and experience it a little bit differently, versus having to read it on a paper. But I know everybody's a little bit different. So if you're a paper book person and that's what you do, then by all means go for it. But if you could go either way, I really like the audio book.
Makes
In
sense.
Yeah, in IFS, we have this idea that we don't have, a simplistic like mono mind, but instead there's a level of complexity and that we all have parts. And I think we've all experienced this to some degree. Like I've met very few people who have not had the experience of getting home from a long day at work. Maybe it's a Friday, you've had a long work week, you sit down and you have this thought and you're like, hey, there's a part of me right now that really wants to go out and go to the movies or go be with friends and go be active, maybe go get dinner. But there's this other part of me that just wants to watch Netflix and order delivery. And it's like all of a sudden you realize, gosh, I'm being pulled in two different directions, right? There's almost these two distinct persons living inside of me that are trying to pull me in one direction over the other, and I got to pick one because they're kind of mutually exclusive. And the idea in IFS is that
So,
that is really a way that our nervous systems exists, is that we have these distinct parts of ourselves that carry unique stories and desires and wants and needs, and that we can be attentive to and listen to those parts of us that have those wants and needs and get to know them and learn how they're functioning to make us the person who we are today. um, that really the system is, or that ourselves, that who we are as a person is made up of a level of complex wants and needs and desires and stories. And by getting to know that, we can navigate the world in a more integrated and fluid way that just feels better.
oh,
Yeah,
just a little bit. I was a little bit short on that one. Sorry about that. Well
that's
done.
okay.
Very, very well done. Nick Sachs asks a good question here. What are early burnout signs people usually ignore? Because I know a lot of, I go through, I mean, this is not an uncommon thing because people are doing what they've got to do to get by the day, right?
Hmm. Most folks don't realize that. I think they're starting to struggle until it's really come to a head. And I think that's because, we all got so much to do. We got mouths to feed, we got jobs to do, we have so many responsibilities. We're getting pulled in a million different directions. But I think what can help is if we all just take some time to slow down and notice what's happening inside of ourselves, what's going on with ourselves. Um, and just getting to know, like, how is it that I'm feeling right now? And is this how I really want to be feeling? Or, is there something else that I really need or that I really want out of my life? And when what we want and what we value is starting to mismatch or not align with what is the reality for me right now, I think we got to take a good look at that and say, hey, this could be a situation where we're running with a lot more friction in this system than we should have. And that's going to lead to burnout pretty quickly here. I think it varies.
Yeah.
I think for some folks, it's just not having interest, not enjoying what we're doing, or just feeling like we're just going through the motions every day.
And that's like when you're doing something that you're just going through the motion. By the way, we're believe it or not, we're already at an hour. That
Yeah,
went like very fast. But do you have a hard stop? We've gone as much as 3 hours. I'm not saying we're going to do that. We've
hmm,
still got a half a dozen questions or so. But do you have a hard stop at all?
I got a hard stop in about 15 minutes or so, if that's okay.
15 minutes. Okay, we're gonna have to go through the questions quickly. And I was gonna ask this question. Now I don't want to, but I really want to. What's
Go
outside your
for it.
window? You have a beautiful. Looks like you have a
Oh,
beautiful apartment or something there. Are you in your office
thank
or?
you. I am actually traveling right now. I am hanging out with some friends in Florida. So
Ah, okay. That's
yeah,
what I noticed out there. Yeah, you're
yes,
you're in a beautiful spot out there. All right, so let's hit some of these pretty quick if we can.
sure.
And for Dennis here, because I like to get through everybody's questions. At least I should have asked you that earlier on.
Oh, that's
But
okay.
I really wanted to get into these different conversations, and keep in
Hmm.
mind, let's stay in contact.
Yeah,
Oh, by the way, please put your contact information in the private chat because somebody's bound
yeah,
to. You know how it is. You do a
sure.
lot of podcasts. A month later, a week later, an hour later, they've said, "Oh man, I
Yeah,
wish I would have asked Carter this." So please put in your
sure.
contact information. But for Dennis here, how can couples support each other when they're both overwhelmed? And that I said that in my and when I was first practicing that part of it, it kind of hit me emotionally because there's that time when you're a couple and you got together for a reason, and over
Mhm.
time things kind of fall off. That the what did you say? Eat or mate? It is the one
Yep,
response. Those
yep.
are the
Feed
really
and
good.
breed.
Eat and breathe. That
Yep,
was it. Eat and breathe. So and and then after a while, that kind of all, the breeding part kind of slows down a little bit. The way
yep.
things are in human beings. But in the opening monologue, I said something to the effect of, um, when 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 you're both so exhausted but you don't feel safe enough to say it out loud, that's when
Mhm.
you've got to really start that bond early and keep it early so you can keep it
Mhm.
long. But this question is critical to a lot of people, right? How do couples support each other when both are so overwhelmed? I mean, I'm overwhelmed and I've got to support you who's also overwhelmed now. I mean, how can people
Yep,
manage that? And let's keep the questions the answers fairly small so we don't get too far out of line here.
sure. So I guess my most concise answer here would be honest with each other. I think you got to say like, "Hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed." Um, I think we also have to acknowledge that sometimes there are things that our partners or our spouses can't provide us, that we may need to look internally inside of ourselves for or learn to access on our own. Um, there's a really helpful couples book. It's entitled "You Are the One You've Been Waiting For." It's also by Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz. And the idea is a lot of times when we're looking for our spouse to fulfill something or our partner to fulfill something, that's actually a reflection of something that we haven't quite yet found inside of ourselves. And if we can take some time to find that inside of ourselves, we set ourselves up for a much better relationship in the long run.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt about it. Um, this is kind of an interesting question to me. I think it goes with the if he had asked the last question, I'd be tying this closer together. But it's an
Mhm.
interesting question. Is emotional shutdown? I'm assuming you're talking about with his spouse. It's a he, right? Yeah, Landrick. Um,
Mhm.
is emotional shutdown a common trauma response? I thought that was a good question. Don't hear that
I think,
very often.
yeah, I think it can be. I think that when we think about our responses on the whole, our nervous systems have learned to be that the way that they are based on our experiences. Like the way that we respond to stimuli and we navigate the world didn't just fall out of the sky and happen randomly. It's because we've learned based on our previous experiences, hey, this is how I can keep myself emotionally safe. This is how I can navigate this situation or this experience that I'm having based on my previous experiences. And our brain and our body is very good at integrating that information subconsciously or really automatically without us putting much conscious thought towards it. But that can be a way that our bodies and our brains have learned, like, hey, when something overwhelming is happening to me, I'll just kind of withdraw internally and I'll shut myself down and shut
Oh,
off.
interesting. Very interesting. What matter? What? Oh, I saw this earlier. I don't know what this. I think this guy is either thinking he's on the wrong show or maybe he said this when he found out you were in Florida. I don't know why he did that. He's been on this show before. I don't know what he's. I don't know what he's doing. Probably drinking. Paula here. How do you define mental health for people with no extra time? Which I think is
Mm,
a lot of people.
it is a lot of folks. Well, it, so I'm going to say this, and I don't want to come off sounding too harsh. Okay, but here's what I want to say at my really at my core is that I think you probably do have a little bit of time. Um, you're just part of your mental health is the fact that it feels like there's no extra time. Um, and I
Mm.
get folks are I mean, I feel it. We're all super busy. I get it, and I get life is really hard, but also, like, I don't know, a lot of people that tell me that they feel like they don't have any extra time seem to spend an awful lot of time on Instagram scrolling or on YouTube, and hey, I think that that's part of it, Rod, right? Like we all got usually some time when we're driving in the car commuting, or we got some time, heck, when we're sitting in the bathroom on the toilet. I mean, let's
So,
leverage those free moments when we can.
so in that same breath or in that same picture is the financial stress of people that live with it day in and day out. What
Mhm.
for Justina here? What advice do you have for parents carrying constant financial stress? Because, and she's saying parents here, so obviously
Mhm.
the kids probably add to the stress, but
Yep.
um, what she's saying probably is here is, hey, I want to be a good mom and not because you tend to lash out to the people you love the most because they're the ones that are
Mhm.
close to you. I assume that's what she's framing this as, but
Yeah.
how would you give a quick talk to Justina here?
Justina, I love the question. And my biggest encouragement for you would be don't be afraid of including your kids in an age appropriate manner in that. Don't feel like you have to hide it from them that money is a little bit tight or that things are tough. And in a way that's developmentally appropriate, include your kids in that. When you're trying to figure out the groceries or you're looking at coupons or other things, bring the kids in, make it a game. Allow them to help and participate. Allow them to use their creativity. And it is a gift to your children to tell them or to be honest with them about, hey, mommy's really stressed right now because we're going to have to figure out how we get enough food at the grocery store today, or hey, mom's stressed because I want to be able to give you this chance to play recreational soccer, but I don't know if we're going to have the money this month. It is okay to be open and honest with your kids about where you're at, or even just saying, hey, mom's stressed right now because things are really tough for mom. Listen,
Let me ask,
your kids know it. They've already
yeah,
figured it out.
yeah. To your point, it's funny the timing of all this stuff that comes in. I tell people, we're on 500 shows now.
Okay.
We've done 500 episodes now, just over the last year and a half. I do 6
Hmm.
episodes a week. But I
Wow.
say that because I get a lot of free advice. I get a lot of really good free
Hmm.
advice. So um, we, I also write the column for the newspaper here. I just
Okay.
started doing that a couple of weeks ago. But
Oh,
the
cool.
reason I say that is, yeah, I'm very excited about it. The reason I say that is because last week in my column, I did uh,
Hmm.
basically it was talking about how kids are watching us more than we realize in our day in and day out lives. And I and I gave in part of that. I gave one point of, hey, you know what? Show your kids your scars.
Yeah.
Not too many of them, but
Hmm.
show them some of your scars because that way they get to see that you also can make it when you're down. You can
Yep.
have issues. You can have financial stress. You can have these scars. And you know what? They don't kill you. Mom got through it. Dad got through it. So
Yep.
adding to what you're saying, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
bringing them in, making it a game is even another step. Probably when they're younger, making it a game, and then in
Hmm.
Regeneration School Project, we talk about finances and stress and mental health, and all these things should be taught in the school. That's a great point. Thank you, Justina. Let's go to Dixon here. How can community play a role when therapy isn't accessible? And I think this kind of probably refers back to when you were talking about
Yeah.
being in a rural area. Is that correct?
It certainly could be, so yeah, how can community play a role? Well, one, I think just by holding space for folks and creating some space for people who are really struggling and just saying, hey, their experience is going to be a little bit different. Um, I know it's hard to watch people suffer, and
It
that's a
is.
normal human response. Um, we got to be honest with ourselves when we're struggling to do that. When hey, it's really hard for me to be around this person because I see them struggling, and that's just hard for me to watch and to be. Um, so I think it starts off with the community just being aware of like where it's at, where the community's at. The community's ability to tolerate and to have space for someone who's hurting. Um, I also think
Now,
part of what.
wait. When you say ability and tolerate,
Mhm.
so are there situations where people don't feel comfortable about going, or are you just talking about what do you mean by that? Tolerate.
Yeah. What I mean is, the community's ability to kind of absorb somebody who is struggling.
Okay.
Um, I totally get, if your community is already on the down and out and struggling, it may be hard to take in and really pull in somebody and hold the space for somebody who is additionally down and out and struggling, you know. And so I think you just got to be honest with your, the bandwidth that you have, the ability that you have to help that person. I also think that with telehealth and with all of the resources we have, um, sometimes it can just be helping somebody navigate their insurance benefits or get connected with somebody, or it's amazing to me how often, even a 25 $30 copay is an insurmountable obstacle. But I also know that for many folks, right, if I sacrificed my morning coffee and, five or six of us put together, took coffee off for a day, right, all of a sudden that's 25 $30 to help our neighbor who needs to receive some care. And so I think, many hands make light work. um
Oh,
I also, and I also think that there's plenty of folks, like myself out there who will get it. Yes, we all have sticker prices, right? We all have, what we got to ask because we got to, turn the lights on and pay the staff and be able to survive ourselves. So we got to charge a fee, but we're also human beings, especially some of the smaller private practices. So if you can help your neighbor, just get in touch with somebody and say, hey, they might not be able to pay this. What can we do? How do we get them help?
all right. So I think we're getting pretty close here. I think
Yeah.
you're right up against your time. You said 15 minutes, and so we're right about there. Why don't we add this last question here that we'll ask
Hmm.
today? And I do want to do some follow-ups if you don't mind
I'd
and we want
love
to
to.
keep in contact.
Yeah.
I think that'd be great. But why don't you this question, which I think is a really cool question, because it kind of goes
Hmm.
into before what are you seeing most your patients? What are people coming to you for? What's the biggest
Hmm.
mental health challenge that you see right now? And then use that as
Hmm.
a send off to your closing remark. You can give your 300 and some odd people, new fans here, a wave goodbye, and I'll see you in the green room to send you off.
Sounds great. Yeah. So maybe the biggest mental health challenge that I think I see, just painting in broad strokes, is I think we all get so used to life being hard and to things being difficult that sometimes we lose sight of, or we give up on the idea that things could even be better. Um,
Ooh,
Folks end up coming to clinical attention. The the number of folks that I see, and it makes me sad, that are in later life, and I ask them, how long have you been feeling this way? And the answer is, well, I can't remember when I haven't. um,
yeah.
and to think that, like, that's how they've spent so many years, but actually there were some things that we can do to help you feel better. And there's no time like the present to work on things. But if I could just say, I think the biggest challenge is folks lose sight, or folks forget, or folks don't see that things could really be better. Um, that it's not always just our circumstances are tough. Sometimes it's that the way that we've learned to navigate and the way that our nervous system is responding to our circumstances could be improved and could benefit from some additional help. Um, and so don't be afraid to reach out, to talk to somebody, to get some help. There's a reason, that there's professionals that do this. This is my day job. It's what I do every day, is help folks live better, live healthier lives. I practice by the mantra that life doesn't have to hurt. And if life is something that
Mm,
just hurts for you, I would encourage you to just go seek some help out, whether that's from, a book, a spiritual leader that you trust, a mental health professional. You know, Life does not have to hurt.
that's beautiful. Give everybody a big wave. I'll catch up with you in the green
Thanks
room
so
here
much,
in a
everyone.
second. It's
Yeah,
been a pleasure, man. Great show. Great show.
thanks.
All right, as promised, and I want to get into some more of those topics, more politically structured or divisive, I guess is a better way to put it. Subjects that are out there in the world, but keeping with this overall message today, we all talk a lot about mental health and struggles and struggles that you don't have to struggle with. I think we're finally coming into a time in society where, Carter said, we're open, we're more open thinking, more I think more intelligent today than we have been in the past, and I think that goes without saying. But just we're gaining knowledge and understanding at a much quicker pace than generations before us. And I think we're open to more concepts and ideas. But what we really need to do is what Carter just said. There is we need to really communicate. We need to really talk. We need to really bring out the issues that we have. And for men, it used to be really, it was a stigma almost to talk about your feelings. Never an advisable thing to do, right? So now we have a society that's leaning more into you need help, get help, man. You need to really really need to find these alternatives. Telehealth is something that's really, I think, a big help. You've got uh, Mr. Doyle's email here, and obviously his website would be the Carter PHMNP. Is that correct, Carter? Is that your website into that email, right?
So yeah, leafpsychiatry.com is my website. And then folks can follow me on social media. Oops, I actually mistyped that. It's Carter PMHNP, Psychiatric Mental Health Nurse Practitioner is what it stands for.
Okay, so all of your social media is the at?
So like if folks go on Instagram or TikTok or wherever they go, if I'm on that platform, it's going to be Carter PMHNP.
Okay, so you did it right. You have all your social media is all the same thing. I told you I started this show about 1.5 years ago, and I just had all this different social media, and I used all the same stuff. So it's all over the place, as you could see earlier. I have this now correctly in your right here. That's social media. The others, the website. All right.
Exactly.
So I just want to make sure we got that right, and I'll be back there in a minute as soon as I wrap up here.
Sounds great. Thanks.
So a little mistake there, but I think we got it covered. Yeah. So check him out at his website. Go to his social media. He's on ours as well. But you've got to really find somebody to start a journey with. You can't do this on your own. Hopefully you're able to go right to a professional like Mr. Doyle here. Or you have a friend like producer Barbie that was there for me at the time when I probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. Those couple of moments. And then led to a professional and like I said, I have the most beautiful job in the world because all day long all I do is get advice from people, all of which I need. And with that said, stay at the end of this past the outro video. I always try and do some goofy little thing that I usually can get a fraction or a couple of seconds out of. And with that, I'm your host, Rod Duff. This is Insights and Straight Talk. And
Before you leave, if you'd like to watch another one of the podcasts, click the first link in the description. We love having you here and we appreciate all your support.
And with that, producer Barbie and I are out.